said it right.
Close enough.
And Adam has the distinguishing honor for his talk of having the most co-authors of any talk. So our expectations are high.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you to the symposium organizers for organizing this event. I'm a researcher in the School of Natural Resources and the Environment at the University of Arizona, and my primary job is to be a project manager for this 4-year project that's funded by the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. It involves a number of colleagues from U of A, Arizona State, as well as the USDA ARS. So the purpose of my talk today is to kind of give you an overview of where this project is now that we're approaching kind of the halfway point, which is kind of a scary thought. And what I want to be able to convey to you is that it's a very interdisciplinary project that it integrates fieldwork with laboratory work and computer mapping and modeling to help us hopefully address some very pressing landscape scale questions that may be of interest to all of you in the room, land managers, scientists, ranchers. So Eric gave us a very good introduction to this. Woody plant proliferation, woody plant encroachment, shrubbification. These are all terms used to collectively refer to the conversion of rangeland or tundra to woody plant cover. And it's a global phenomenon. Now, we can't really ascribe a single causative factor to this phenomenon. It's very site and context specific. We can generally say that it's some sort of combination of land changes in land use and land cover, livestock overgrazing, as well as fire suppression. Now, certainly in southeastern Arizona, this is a big concern for land managers and ranchers, and the primary culprit in this case is probably velvet mesquite. So the perception is that as woody plant encroachment progresses, you have a reduction in available grass cover for food for the cattle, and then the resulting bare spots leads to accelerated erosion. So what we tend to do is we implement brush management schemes, tools used to reduce woody cover with the effect that we will hopefully reduce woody cover, improve grass cover, and reduce erosion. Now, brush management can take on several forms: mechanical, chemicals such as one you see here, or sometimes burning. But now the question is well, is this really accomplishing its goals? And if you look at the scientific literature, the jury's still kind of out on this. Some say there is improvement after brush management. Some say there's no change at all. Some others say, well, actually, the system continues to degrade. But the limitation of these studies is that they were conducted at relatively small areas over short periods of time. So what we're missing here are these landscape scale projects that encompass multiple years of monitoring. In addition, well, we have this narrow focus on reducing erosion and improving forage production. But what else are we missing? Are there other benefits that we're not in a good position to evaluate right now? Or are there potential trade-offs that we're missing? So for example, if you're worried about a two-word phrase, both words start with C, right? Woody plants are actually good at storing carbon on the landscape, taking carbon out of the atmosphere, storing it on the landscape. If we remove that woody cover, we're losing that mitigation potential. If we're actually able to incorporate a much broader perspective, encompassing ecosystem services, benefits that this ecosystem provides humans, well, then maybe it might be in a better position to evaluate whether brush management is quote-unquote worth it. Not just financially speaking, because it can be expensive, but also ecologically. So that's kind of the purpose of this project. Look at how brush management impacts ecosystem services over a large scale. Right? We start off with a pre-treatment position, monitoring ecosystem services, impose a brush management scheme involving aerial herbicide application, and tracking the responses of ecosystem services for 3 years post-treatment. Then using computer mapping and modeling project longer-term trends, which is of interest to land managers 5, 10, and 20 years out. Now, if brush management is quote-unquote worth it, then we can start to inform this conceptual model of herbaceous cover and woody plant encroachment. So over time, what we would expect to see is woody plants shown here in the brown line increase, herbaceous cover decreases, right? At some point, we're going to impose a brush management scheme, and then the impact we would expect would be a reduction in woody cover. But is there an immediate response to the grasses? Maybe, maybe not. What is that time period between brush management and the response? From there, we would expect some time to elapse before grasses start to respond and peak out. What is that time period? And then we would expect the grasses to kind of plateau, followed by probably a decrease, and the woody cover starts to respond again. What is that time period? And is that an appropriate time period to then implement a new brush management scheme? So hopefully this project will start to be able to add numbers to this conceptual model in an effort to kind of guide management policy. So we're focusing on our study on the Santa Rita Experimental Range, which is, we're down here at the Appleton Middle Ranch. Santa Rita Experimental Range is managed by the U of A. It spans an environmental gradient from Sonoran creosote up through desert grassland all the way up to oak woodland. So we're focusing in on the desert grassland portion, the south central part of the range. And our focus area are 4 watersheds that were developed by the USDA in the 1970s. These watersheds provide data for precipitation and runoff for about 40 years now, 40 plus years. We used 2 watersheds and the surrounding area as the treatment. So everything in this brown polygon has been undergone the brush management scheme involving aerial herbicide application. These other 2 watersheds are untreated controls. So when I joined the project in summer of 15, here's a few shots of the study site. So when I joined the project in summer of 2015, my job was actually to choose develop mosquito individuals which we would monitor ecosystem services from the pre-treatment position phase to the post-treatment phase. So I chose 120 mosquito individuals, about roughly 30 for each watershed. Now let's take a trip to one of these mosquito individuals. So the ecosystem services that we're monitoring include primary production, diversity, carbon storage potential, sediment and runoff, and carbon exchange between the atmosphere and the land. So this first one, we want to look at above ground biomass, both the woody and herbaceous components, and then when we monitor that over long term, we can translate that to primary production. So for this first part, woody pet production. For each of these trees, I would have to actually measure the diameters, the heights, and the canopy dimensions of each of these trees. We take those numbers and we throw them into a series of equations that another researcher developed, where he got the same measurements, cut down a bunch of mesquite trees into little parts, cut them down into little parts, dried all those pieces in an oven and weighed them. So what you have now is a relationship between these measurements and estimated biomass. Okay. Then when you track those and repeat that process multiple years in a row, you can translate that to primary production. Getting at the herbaceous component, both the diversity and biomass apart, I would go to each of these trees, lay a 1 square meter plot under the canopy, because the composition is different under the canopy as opposed to away from the canopies. So I have a plot A and a plot B, different composition in each one. And then after I had done that for most of these trees, there was something in my laboratory that, from my colleagues, that wasn't enough data. So I had to go back and actually add in a 3rd plot, the plot C that you see there. So within each of these plots, I would classify each individual to species. And then looking at the perennial grasses only, get an estimate of biomass. So that means involving getting measurements of the diameter, the circumference, which translates to diameter, as well as the height. That plant then gets clipped, bagged, identified, transported back to our lab, and repeated for each of these other grasses, which have now disappeared from the scene. So this is our lab in October 2015. Each of these bags contains one of those plants. So all those plants had to be dried and weighed. But now we have the same kind of equation. We have an equation that relates, diameter and height to mass. That way, in subsequent years, we just get those measurements, we throw them into the equations, we don't have to worry about doing all this clipping and drying. And that took about 3 months of work just to get all that done in the boxes here. Now, the next part is looking at the coarse woody debris component. So if woody plants are really great at storing carbon on the ground or beneath the ground. So if you implement brush management, you might be losing that potential mitigation effect. But they have all those sticks on the ground too, and that could be an important carbon component that we're missing. Now a lot of work has been done in forests on coarse woody debris, but hardly anything has been done in drylands. So this affects carbon modeling, this affects decomposition. It's really a unique opportunity to actually assess that component of the system. So that would mean going to a subset of all those 120 trees, collecting all the sticks on the ground, weighing them, doing some laboratory work. Now we have an estimate now of the amount of carbon on the ground that's not live and standing. And here are some of my students who are actually having to weigh those samples. And then we also have a soil carbon component. We're actually collecting soil samples from most of these trees down to about 20 centimeters in depth. We process those samples, we ship them to a lab where they estimate total carbon, soil organic carbon, soil inorganic carbon, and total nitrogen. Now the lab is still working on our pre-treatment soil data, so I don't quite have those to show you. But I do want to show you some other results that we have so far. In June of 2016, I helped to organize and manage the herbicide application that occurred by a helicopter. I did have a video of the treatment, but we've lost the video. So remember that picture of the helicopter on top of the mixing truck? Pretend that helicopter's moving. Now for our results. The 4 common perennial grass species on this area are large striped bristlegrass, Arizona cottontop, and then the 2 non-native species, weeping lovegrass or boar lovegrass and layman lovegrass. So let's look at the diversity results. These are what we call rank abundance or dominance diversity curves. So a land manager who's interested in diversity might use these graphs to help estimate how diverse and how resilient this land is. On the x-axis we have number of species, so maybe more species means a better land. We also, on the y-axis, the proportion of each species to the total population. So more numbers of each species might also be a better thing. So depending upon your land management scheme and your targets, you might want to look at one of these lines that either angles like this or is flat. Okay? If you have a really steep line, that means there's only 1 or 2 species that are abundant. Depending upon the land, that might not be an ideal management endeavor. I'm sorry, the light blue line, which is 2015, is hard to see, but you can see that the lines really haven't changed all that much between 2015, the pre-treatment phase, and 2016, which is the post-treatment phase. But we do see a response of both native and non-native species. They've both taken advantage of the mesquite treatment and are now encroaching on the under canopy area. So if you're worried about layman lovegrass, where you have native plant species underneath the mesquite, the laymen seem to be encroaching under the canopies. That could potentially be a problem longer term. It'll be interesting to see how these play out this fall, after the monsoon. If we look at the mesquite, the woody biomass, okay, these are all the 120 mesquite trees by circle. Blue circles represent that there's been an increase in biomass. Red circles indicate a reduction in biomass. And the size of the circle represents how much the absolute value change in terms of kilograms of biomass. So we look at the treatment area at the top, there's lots of variability. Right? But if you take an average of all those numbers together, it's about a 7% reduction in biomass. So that's kind of the pattern that we would see. Trend is expected, but the variability, the spatial magnitude of change is pretty significant. So if we're actually looking at this conceptual model, we're only about to this point right here. So maybe there's not so much of a lag, but we need a little bit more data to actually validate that. And if we look at the coarse woody debris component, on average is about, if you compare the actual amount of mass standing and live compared to what's standing on the ground, they're about equal. So that's a pretty significant component of carbon that we're missing in other studies. Thank you. Now, because not a lot of work has actually been done on velvet mesquite and herbicide efficacy, this is a useful way for us to actually kind of approach that. Unfortunately, with our site, the mesquite treatment has not been as successful as we had hoped. So this was right before the treatment, this is about 3 months after. You see these funny little growths of leaves here across the canopy. One of the chemicals that we used, it mimics the hormone called auxin, which regulates plant growth. So when you add this chemical on, you're essentially causing the plant to grow itself to death. So you have these really funky growths of leaves following. I've been able to track the recovery of the foliage. And what we're starting to see is about 9 months post-treatment, for the most part across 4 transects, the trees are coming back pretty strong. Whether this is just whether they're doing just fine, or whether they're starting themselves from their root stores is another story. I'm going to track this a little bit longer. Now, this project also provides a unique opportunity to actually look at some of the remote sensing and technologies that have been developed recently, structured from motion and drone work. So what you saw here was a series of photographs of a mesquite tree. Take all those photographs, throw them in a software package, and that will stitch all those photos together into a 3-dimensional model that you see here. This was animated, but I can't get the animation to work. What you have here is a 3-dimensional model of each of these trees. The idea here is that we validate these models with the field data I've collected, and we should be able to estimate all these different services just from this one model. So that's another tangent of this project that's kind of been developing over the past few months. And there's a drone component thank you, where we regularly fly a drone over the treatment area, and we can actually use the imagery generated from those drones and then put them into our models, which will allow us to predict future changes longer term. I'm missing the video on that one, unfortunately. That gives you a sense as to what the treatment area looks like about 1 month in July of 2016. Everything in yellow here has been treated. Everything towards the Senorita has been, in the background, has not been treated. And the final few minutes I have to wrap up, I would have to acknowledge my students that have helped me with this endeavor. To date, I've had 16 undergraduate students at the U of A who have been instrumental in helping me collect this data. And most of these students are now going on doing great things. Graduate school, working for NRCS, National Park Service, and furthering their education. So it's really great to see a lot of promising students involved and doing great things beyond. So with that, I have a website that I've developed to help track communicate the results of this project. Some of the videos are available here if you're interested, and this will be updated regularly so you can be able to track how this is progressing for the next 2 years. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to address any questions or comments that you might have in the time that we have left.
On that model where you have the photographs that
Yes.
do a model of the tree, has that been used on other species or just trees?
There's been some work done on some trees, I think, in temperate forests, but nothing so much in dry altitude. So this might be a first opportunity to actually look at that.
Okay.
Your
Yes, ma'am.
photograph of the proposed trees, it looked like a lot of woody material had been removed. Is that a follow-up to the... Yeah, you're showing pictures of pretty big trees, and you said it was a chemical treatment. But that, yeah, is that like up in the air, way high?
Yeah, this is about 50 meters high right now.
Okay, so those are the dead trees or the defoliated trees?
Right.
Got it.
Can you argue where that's what I thought?
Sure.
Can you give us the website back?
We'll make sure when we compile the proceedings that we have that in there. Prominently. But yes, but please raise it again now too. Yeah. One more question?
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks.